Hello, everybody. It's Dr. G. I have something very special for you today. There was a podcast hosted by Mr. Jay Shetty with his guest, Madonna, the great iconic pop star herself, discussing her 29 years of serious spiritual life. And let's get right into it.
I've had the same teacher for all this time. I feel like almost like it's my responsibility to share with people, because I feel like people need guidance. People need enlightenment. And for me, a spiritual life is having an internal life. We live in a very busy, chaotic world. Lots of noise, lots of distraction. I mean, how many times have you heard people say, oh, social media and like all the, people can't walk down the street without listening to music. Everybody has to be visually stimulated all the time. Like, there's no peace. There's no quiet. We're not comfortable being quiet with ourselves.
So here Madonna is touching on the tip of the great iceberg, which is the massive bombardment of information sensory overload, nonstop, 24/7. What that does is rob us of contemplative space, peace. We can't even sit alone and be quiet without our phones. Think about that.
And you're going to see everything that happens to you as just a random event. And I don't believe that anything is random. I think everything that happens to us is meant to happen to us, to teach us some kind of a lesson. But, the question is, are you aware enough? Are you awake enough? Are you interested enough to find out what that reason is? Like, why did this happen to me? What is my lesson?
As a spiritual seeker, meaning is of tremendous significance. Man's Search for Meaning, it's a very famous title. So what she's saying is aware enough, awake enough, and interested enough to look for the meaning. Because in fact, there is no such thing as a random event. Everything is dependently arising and dependently ceasing. And then you apply her equation. Are you awake enough, aware enough, and are you interested enough to understand that?
And the point of that third space, it's kind of what you're saying, was a place that you could look back at work and home, and you could reflect on your life. You could take stock. You could introspect. But as time's gone on, what's happened is we lost that third space. We stopped going to temple, church, community, whatever it may be.
A place of self-reflection.
A place of self-reflection. And we ended up with work and home. And then after the pandemic, we lost work. And so now we're in one space, and we don't have a different vantage point to where we are anymore, which is what I think you're saying.
Go back on even one more step that to me is like a prison. If you remove the spiritual life, spiritual practice, you remove the workplace, then you're in the home, and then removed once more from home is you're looking at your phone, which is even takes you out of home.
It's a great point, yeah.
So, like, where are you? You're nowhere.
We're all living in the virtual world. Yeah, we're living in the virtual world, not even in the material world.
Love this clip. Absolutely brilliant on Jay's part. This is something that is fundamental to people who study or learn or apply feng shui, or in India we say vastu, but it is the use of specific spaces to cultivate our life. In the old days, unfortunately, it's like the old days for most of humanity now. The workspace where you live, your home, and then there was the reflective place like a church, a synagogue, a monastery, going out into nature, but it was separate spaces. And then Madonna very accurately points out that with all of those lost, there's a fourth one. They just disappear into the mind through the phone. And then it's only a mental, or what he's referring to as a virtual space.
And a virtual world is not a bad world, but if you don't have consciousness, there's really no point to living.
So it's interesting to think about that, because I feel like everyone can relate to the idea that if we need physical spaces to sometimes make us do internal things.
Yes. I mean, some kind of ritualistic behavior has to happen.
What have been your rituals? I'm intrigued. I'm curious. What are your spiritual practices and rituals that have been so supportive and emblematic of your journey that have kept you going at the times, as you said, there were so many times you could give up or things could go wrong, or you kept pushing and they kept you locked? What were they? What are they?
Well, one really important thing is studying, making time every week to sit down and study. I mean, you can study the Bible, you can study the poetry of Kahlil Gibran, or you can study the Vedas. You know.
She's describing spiritual methodology, and then she uses the word ritualistic behavior. So every kind of spiritual pathway or dharma has its own sadhana or method of practice. In her Kabbalistic way, they do a great deal of study. And as he questions her, what are the rituals that have sustained her through the adversities of her life? She describes that every week, irregardless of anything, she has time set aside for study. They study the like scriptures or sacred writings and philosophy. This is the Kabbalistic way, but it is embedded into her life. And that is essential to understand. All spiritual seekers, all pathways from any culture across time must have a ritualistic, structured practice. Otherwise, there's no growth.
Are those teachers still your teachers?
Yes, absolutely. Still since that time. So it's been nearly 20 years now.
That's meaningful.
Yeah, very meaningful.
And are your friends that came with you still also studying or practicing?
One of those, yes, absolutely. One of those friends was my best man at my wedding, and he studies under the same teacher still this day.
That's cool.
So there you have a classic conversation between two seekers, because the questions she asks that every seeker, when they meet each other or reference each other, is the first thing they want to know. Are you still with the same teacher? How many years have you been with that teacher? And look at him. I'm so impressed. Nearly 20 years. And 20-year mark is a milestone. Now, why is this significant? Why is this so impressive? Let me make this perfectly clear. There is only one way to impart spiritual life, period, between a master and their student. No exceptions to that rule, period. It's always from a master to a pupil. You don't pick it up on a computer or out of a book. It comes from the heart and mind of the master directly to the heart and mind of the student. And it involves life and experience and feelings and suffering and challenge and everything else. It is a human interaction. Otherwise, it's just la la land. Okay, so that's why I respect both of them very much.
You need to be spiritual to be successful. Success is having a spiritual life, period.
Okay, I admire Madonna's conviction here, but she's not entirely correct because of one thing. She didn't define success. Which kind of success? Because success means something different to cultures, generations, people. But given that omission of the definition, she is correct in one way. We'll get to that later in this podcast.
First, there's just my determination that I think I had such an unhappy childhood that whatever happened to me in New York City, I was like, whatever happens to me is better than what my life was. So I'm sticking around. I'm not going back. But you see, the worst things that happen to you are the best things that happen to you, because if my childhood hadn't been what it had been, if I hadn't lost my mother, if I hadn't had all of these challenges as a child, I would have thought of my home as a place of comfort, and I would have gone back. But I didn't, so that's what kept me going. And then, there are challenges in my career. Even though I was very successful, I went through many periods of time where the press was beating up on me. I was demonized. What kept me going? I don't know.
I know what kept her going. Kept me going too. In any case, what she's alluding to here is the suffering she underwent as a child. That's something common to about 99% of all the population. and a few rise out of it, and most unfortunately don't. Now, her pathway is called the Kabbalah, and what she's showing you here is that she's able to reframe suffering and adversity in such a way that she finds meaning, and the meaning can drive her forward. Plus, she has that ingrained determination inside her. The determination, I believe, she's born with. I was born with mine. I believe you are born with that. That's something intrinsic that you bring into this life. But the ability to reframe is a learned cognitive skill, and the Kabbalah is very adept as a pathway in developing that.
How did you hold on to that beautiful belief that you're not the light and you're a manager of the light when anyone else could easily believe they were?
By continuing to have a spiritual practice, a spiritual life, by continuing to study, like always pulls you back to center.
Okay, so this one is one of my favorites. Although Madonna is a world-renowned, iconic entertainer, she, regardless of all the success that this lady has had, she has declared she's not the light. She's channeling the light. And so Jay says, so how did you do that? What kept you from falling into that trap? And she describes her spiritual practice. So few people, so few ever reach this level of maturity in the Dharma. Most get seduced and trapped in personal power and assume their empty titles and all the silly nonsense that goes on. That's why all seekers, without exception, anywhere in the world, at any point in time, period, they sit at the feet of their masters. Like I told you before, this is a living system. You don't get it from a book or a computer or something. So you have to have a master. And the master, when I say the word master, I don't mean an expert or some kind of demonstrable skill or some kind of PhD or intellectual knowledge. It's got nothing to do with that. You find a real master, they have the presence and they have the consciousness, which is transferred to the student. That is what will keep the student out of the trap of the ego, out of the trap of name and fame. That's the key. That's what Madonna has. That's what Jay has. When they stated earlier, they've been with the same teacher for a long, long time. So I want you to really pound that into your mind, because without that, it's you're looking at la la land.
People who are focused on making money are definitely not focused on spiritual life. You have to have your feet in both worlds. And
you literally wouldn't do a show on a day because that was your study day.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see her devotion and commitment. She, the lady makes a lot of money when she does a show. She didn't do the show because it was her day for her spiritual practice. So you can, any one of us can admire that, because as the old saying says, put your money where your mouth is. Now she's describing, she says, you have to have your feet in both worlds, because if you're only working for money and you don't have a spiritual life, you don't have both, then it's wrong and it doesn't work. Okay, that's fine, and that is true, but that's a level. That's like a novice level. Let's say the novice level will last about 20 years, which is normal. Nothing wrong with that. you have work, and then when we start out, we have our practice with our teacher. Okay. And it goes on like that. And then you might have 2 or 3 other areas of your life, and one of the areas is your spiritual practice. But eventually, if the spiritual practice is deep and profound, if the teacher has a high enough level to model it and so forth, all of life becomes your spiritual practice. All of it. Everything. Walking the dog, taking out the garbage, going to the office, being with your partner, doesn't make any difference. It's all the Dharma. But that is a high level, and it takes a long time to get there.
Honestly, it's really hard to balance being a parent, having work, having a spiritual life. You're constantly juggling. There's not a lot of time to rest. And if people don't recognize that, then they're just going to look at you in a very 1% like superficial way and go, "You're late." It's like, but you don't understand what I was doing before I became late.
Okay, quadrants of life. So when I teach how to engineer your life, as was taught to me, you take you can divide your life up into quadrants. Okay, so you have work, home, gym, etc., 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 and then you have your spiritual practice. Wherever you are, if you're at work, you're at work. You're focused. When you're at dinner, you don't take your phone and put it on the dinner table. You eat dinner and you're present with your guests or your family. To do otherwise is the height of ignorance. In any case, everything is focused. Now, the difference between work and a spiritual practice is the spiritual practice informs and qualifies all other quadrants of life until eventually your entire life, every quadrant, is your spiritual practice. That is the hallmark of a spiritual practice. That is the purpose of a spiritual practice. It takes time, and it takes a practice that is capable of doing that. There are a lot of pathways these days that are not lineaged, and they will never accomplish that in a million years. I think Kabbalah's intellectual approach makes the integration process a little slower. It depends on the process and also on the teacher. I learned the difference in the year 2002 when I first began studying directly in Japan. And the study method there was holistic, not exclusivistic. And the difference is profound.
And now we live in a world where everyone follows algorithms, and algorithms are the opposite of taking chances. They're the opposite of being unique. They're the opposite of spiritual life. They're the opposite of consciousness. That's why artificial intelligence cannot duplicate consciousness. It can duplicate doing things, following formulas, but it can't duplicate consciousness.
All I can say to Madonna here is God bless her. Now she has if I understand this right, she's got like millions of followers. I hope every single one of them heard what she said clearly, because it's so important. We're shifting into the age of AI. And what she says is absolutely true. AI may look real convenient, and in a lot of ways it is. It's also threatening all life on Earth. So I hope every last one of the people who listen to her takes that to heart. I teach that every day, and it's imperative the people and society in the world understands that, whether they're headed down the wrong road.
Yeah, the intention and the purity with
Intention and consciousness.
it.
Yeah, I just repeat that like a mantra. Consciousness is everything. Consciousness is everything. But a lot of people don't even know what that is.
That's right. Most people don't know what consciousness is. They've never experienced it. See, when a person meditates and the teacher says, sit quietly and watch your thoughts come and go. So once they can do that and they see a thought coming and going, then the teacher will say, what was it or who was it that was looking at the thought? See, a guy, a famous man one time said the words, I think, therefore I am. Wrong. Wrong. Dead wrong. The I am can see the thought. The thought cannot see I am. So consciousness is everything. That's all you are. That's all anything is. What does intention do? Intention qualifies and quantifies the consciousness.
When you're not manifesting with the consciousness that you are channeling something, you don't own it. So that's a big thing.
That's the key part of it.
Yeah, sure.
So
if I have a successful show, if anything happens to me successfully, like is perceived as a success in the outside world, I just say, that's how blessed am I? I manifested that with the help of God. I didn't do it on my own. I do nothing on my own. And if you think you're manifesting on your own, and you're like an ostrich with your head in the sand.
I love her style. The way she describes things is excellent. I want to repeat one quote from her. I manifested that with the help of God. I didn't do it on my own. I do nothing on my own, unquote. Well, that's the absolute truth. But it takes a fairly conscious person who can recognize grace to understand that. You don't do anything on your own. Nothing. Everything is a matter of grace, and you are channeling. Period. There is nothing else. But you have to become conscious of that. That's her whole point and purpose in this podcast. God bless her.
Manifesting success is whenever you want something for the sake of sharing. When you want something just for yourself, like I'll be happy when I have 10 Bugattis and a mansion in every major city, and I'm the brand ambassador of Louis Vuitton. No offense to Louis Vuitton, just throwing that out there. But you know what I mean? Like those things like really make people happy. But it's short-lived. And sooner or later, everybody comes to that realization anyways. It's just whether it's sooner or later.
Yeah, it's just whether it's sooner or later. Hopefully sooner. The point I want you to get from that clip is this, and the comment that I want to make is this. She's describing what is known as wealth consciousness, wealth creation. What does that mean? That means her opening sentence, when you're manifesting or creating with the objective of sharing. Wealth creation is where everyone and everything involved benefits. Just accumulating money for the sake of money or for the sake of a thing, like having a bunch of cars or something, that is not spiritual life. That is not wealth creation. And if it's for real selfish reasons, the divine will not support it at all. there's all kinds of support. There's the dark side and there's all kinds of things that could support it, but the divine will not support it. So wealth creation is the objective of spiritual life.
I think the way it's being talked about right now is just be clear about your goals and be really clear about what you want. And
I mean, that's important
Yeah.
too. Say out loud what you want out of life. That is important, but you're in a partnership. That's really what's important to remember.
I love this clip very much. So Jay describes the current state of affairs quite accurately. And then she is saying that we're in a partnership. What's the partnership? That is what I term as the bond. This is the objective of Sriyama Bhagavan's 81,000 and oneness. The formation and establishment of the partnership, the bond between you, between us, and our personal divine. And it's personal. Every single person has their own divine and their own relationship, and that's fine with the divine. The divine is not a particular. But the partnership needs to be made conscious, needs to be cultivated. Just like when you see somebody that you want to meet socially, what do? Well, you have to start talking to them. You go over to meet them. You strike up a conversation. You build rapport. And step by step, you establish a relationship. And then the relationship grows and entails all kinds of things. Anything from might be business, or it could be romantic, some kind of a deep friendship. But the rapport and the partnership, the bond has got to be established. That's what she's talking about here. That's the whole point of this entire conversation.
We become our environments as well. So we want to surround ourselves with people with like-minded individuals. And if you are around people who also are attaining to reach a higher level of consciousness, or want to know the deeper meanings of life, or want to look inward and figure out what their karmic destiny is, or even take into consideration the idea of karma. I mean, you need that also, because if you don't have that support system, then you can also fall back into the trap of recreating formulas that work, or trying to capture some magical moment and make it magic again. And that's just our ego taking over and telling us, I did that.
I did that. I can do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't.
No.
Anything when we say amorphic field, or what he's describing here, what she's describing here, is community, your tribe, your group. It's a well-known neurologic fact in neuroscience. You're going to be the people you associate with. They're going to be you, you're going to be them. You influence them, they influence you. In your brain, you have mirror neurons. And that's what they do, they mirror. So the community you are associating yourself with is very, very important. If you're a spiritual person, I have a client who's very spiritual, but unfortunately her family and her spouse are anti-spiritual. And the incongruity holds her down like an anchor around her feet underwater. So the community is essential. And as what she doesn't mention here that I'm going to teach you is the community's got to be centered ideally around a single master, not a group of masters, a single master. For instance, you can see the community that Thich Nhat Hanh has left behind. He passed away now. Magnificent. and he's a real master. So he was able to make a real community. And the consciousness of that community is very high. It's a Buddhist community. So the teacher can only make a community equal to the level he has. And then because the community is revolving around his field, there's real congruence. Real congruence gives power. The power of the group supports the group physically, mentally, emotionally, in every way. I'm getting off topic here, but these things run very, very, very deep. This podcast is serving very well to give a nice introduction toward a spiritual life.